Natalie Winters was crying alone in the restaurant restroom, convinced her entire career had just collapsed. But suddenly there was a knock on the door. "You have to come out right now." The voice belonged to her greatest rival of the past 3 years, and that very moment changed both of their lives forever. Hey, Soul Stories fam! We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Please comment on where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. That summer was so sweltering that the heat seemed to rise like flames off the asphalt. The trees along the street quivered under the oppressive wind. Their green leaves wilted, while the sun poured down in blinding patches across the glass facade of the high-rise. The headquarters of Hamilton and Company, a prestigious architecture firm in the city. Natalie Winters stood outside, adjusting the collar of her pale blue blouse, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the folder against her chest. She took a deep breath, but the mix of car exhaust and hot summer dust caught in her throat. Today was the most important interview of her life. If she failed, she might have to go back to small, odd design jobs, never reaching the dream of creating buildings stamped with her own signature. Stepping through the gleaming revolving doors, the rush of cool air conditioning wrapped around her like a gentle embrace after the scorching heat. The waiting area came into view, rows of gray leather chairs, a glass table stacked high with thick architecture magazines, and a handful of other candidates scattered about, all wearing tense expressions. Natalie smoothed her brown hair, neatly tied at the nape of her neck, and told herself, "Stay calm, Winters. Just show what you can do, and everything will fall into place." She chose a seat near the corner, setting the folder on her lap, her eyes quickly sweeping the room. And in that instant, Natalie saw him. A young man in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his tie knotted to perfection. He sat a few seats away, flipping through a magazine with an air of leisure, as if this weren't a life-or-death interview, but simply a coffee break. What struck Natalie most was the faint curl of his lips, a smile brimming with confidence. Or rather arrogance. Their eyes met by chance. He raised an eyebrow slightly, then smirked. "I didn't expect to see you here, Winters." Natalie froze. That voice, that gaze, of course. Damian Matthews, her rival in countless design competitions during college. His name was etched into her memory, marked by debates that left her breathless and the sting of him winning just when she thought she had the prize in her grasp. "Matthews," she replied, striving for calm though irritation surged in her chest. "You look very confident." Damian leaned back in his chair, spinning the magazine in his hand. "Of course. I believe this job was always meant for me. But I'm glad you came. It would have been boring without someone for me to beat." Natalie tightened her grip on the folder, lips pressed thin. "You always like to talk before the results are in. And you always cling to absolute fairness," Damian said with a grin, flipping to another page. "But in this world, Winters, fairness is just a word on paper." The remark made Natalie's cheeks burn. She turned away, though she couldn't stop thinking, "He's always like this, confident to the point of being unbearable." The wait stretched endlessly. One candidate was called in, then another. Natalie closed her eyes, steadying her breath. When the secretary finally said, "Miss Winters, please come in," her heart pounded wildly. The interview room was bright, and 3 judges were seated behind a long table. Natalie presented smoothly, speaking about her portfolio and the smaller projects she had completed. She felt she was in control until one of the panelists asked, "If you were on a team with another very strong architect, how would you make sure you weren't overshadowed?" Damian's face flickered in her mind. Natalie inhaled, then answered firmly, "I wouldn't try to dim anyone else's light. I'd give my all and let my work shine on its own." When she walked out, sweat dampened her blouse, but her eyes gleamed with determination. Minutes later, Damian was called in. As he passed her, he leaned close and whispered, "Get ready, Winters. I'm about to beat you again." Natalie clenched her fists, refusing to answer. But inside, the fire of determination roared stronger than ever. A week later, the envelope from Hamilton and Company arrived. Natalie's hands shook as she tore it open, and her heart tightened. The capital letters stood out clearly. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted." She screamed with joy, clutching the letter as tears welled in her eyes. Finally, all her effort had paid off. On her first day, Natalie wore a simple office dress and arrived at the office earlier than scheduled. The new employee orientation was held in a large hall. She found a seat in the middle row, her heart brimming with hope for a fresh start. But then, a familiar figure strode in straight, face glowing with smug satisfaction. Damian Matthews. His eyes swept across the room until they landed on her. His playful wink made Natalie freeze. "No way," she muttered. Damian dropped into the seat beside her, leaning over to whisper, "Looks like this company has a unique hiring taste. We're rivals again, Winters." Natalie swallowed hard, her fingers clenching the pen tight. She knew from that moment on a new chapter had begun, a chapter where she and Damian, whether they liked it or not, had become fated rivals. Time slipped by faster than Natalie had imagined. From that fateful day onward, she and Damian had spent 3 full years working under the same roof at Hamilton and Company. 3 years in which the office had been both battlefield and training ground, where every step they took seemed powered by one particular energy: rivalry. Every morning at 8 sharp, Natalie walked into the open-plan 12th floor design department. The clatter of keyboards, the scratch of pencils across paper, the steady hum of the plotter printer, all blended into a symphony of work. Across the room, Damian always arrived 5 or 10 minutes late, yet never looked rushed. He would stroll in with a steaming cup of coffee, his white shirt crisp and wrinkle-free, his brown hair neatly styled as though he had just stepped out of a magazine. "Early again to claim the best seat, Winters?" Damian greeted her with his usual teasing line, his eyes flicking toward her neatly organized desk. Natalie didn't look up, her tone dry. "At least I don't spend half an hour fixing my tie in front of the mirror like someone else." Her colleagues chuckled. The morning sparring match had become something of a tradition in the office. Everyone was used to Natalie and Damian constantly clashing, like opposite poles of a magnet drawn together, neither one willing to yield. In team meetings, their rivalry flared even more sharply. If Natalie proposed using reflective glass to optimize natural light, Damian would immediately counter, "Not a bad idea, if we were still living in 2010. Natalie wasn't one to back down, smirking as she replied, "Better outdated than defying the laws of physics. Your so-called bold structure could collapse any minute." The air grew taut as a drawn bowstring. Yet strangely, after every verbal duel, both of them worked harder, as if their rival was the very source of their drive. In her daily life, Natalie was fortunate to have Dina, her witty and lovable best friend and colleague. Dinah always wore round glasses, her loosely curled hair tied high, giving her a perpetually busy, yet never too busy appearance. Yet she was always willing to gossip. "I swear you two are acting in a soap opera right before our eyes," Dina muttered one day after Natalie stormed out of another heated argument with Damian. "And today, the way you looked at him was definitely different." Natalie frowned. "Different how?" It was pure annoyance. "Yeah, annoyance. With a little sparkle," Dina said with a giggle. "Dinah?" Natalie's cheeks flushed as she ducked her head over the drafting table. Dina was the observer in their strange relationship, often hinting slyly that what tied Natalie and Damian together wasn't just professional hatred. Every time Natalie denied it, Dina would only smile knowingly. "Don't lie to yourself." The truth was, Natalie couldn't deny one thing. Her eyes often drifted toward Damian, lingering longer than necessary. She told herself it was because she needed to watch every detail of what he did, to find a way to counter him. But deep down, she knew there was something else, an urge she couldn't name. One evening, when the team stayed late to finish drawings, the office was nearly empty, the white lights casting long shadows. Natalie bent over her design when she heard slow footsteps approaching. "That line, a little unbalanced," Damian's voice came from just behind her. She spun around. "I don't need free advice." Damian planted a hand on the desk, leaning closer, narrowing the distance between them to only a few handspans. In the dim light, his eyes gleamed with mischief. "I'm only concerned about the company's quality," he said, pausing, then smiled faintly. "But honestly, your design isn't bad." Natalie froze for a beat. Damian Matthews. Complimenting her? Before she could react, he had already turned away, leaving only the faint trace of his cologne in the air. That entire night, Natalie couldn't focus. In the days that followed, their hot and cold war continued, sparring by day, with the occasional unexpected moment at night. Soon, people in the office started placing bets, wondering how long before the two of them stopped fighting, or finally fell in love. Natalie forced a laugh whenever she heard such jokes, but unease stirred in her chest. She had never imagined letting Damien take up so much space in her mind. Damien felt it too. Though his mouth never stopped teasing, his gaze sometimes softened when he noticed her exhaustion, or flickered with concern when she worked so intently that she skipped lunch. Neither of them said a word, but both could feel it, an invisible thread pulling them together, taut and unbreakable. 3 years spun by in that rhythm. They were no longer the nervous newcomers of their first day, but had become the two most prominent names in the design department. Every drawing Natalie submitted carried her trademark precision and elegance. Every idea Damien presented was bold, creative to the point of recklessness. They were opposites, yet complemented each other, and because of that, their rivalry never ceased. But deep inside, Natalie knew this competition wasn't only sharpening their talent, it was stirring up something ambiguous, something that made her want to push Damien away, yet left her unable to stop watching his every move. On Monday morning, Hamilton and Company's design department buzzed with unusual excitement. Everyone was whispering about the news that had just spread. The firm had officially signed a preliminary agreement with Skyline Corporation, one of the largest real estate giants in the country. This wasn't just another contract, it was a golden bombshell in the world of architecture. Natalie had just set her coffee cup down when she overheard a colleague whispering beside her. "Did you hear? Skyline wants to build a commercial complex downtown. The budget is in the hundreds of millions." Dina's excitement was so intense that her glasses nearly slipped off her nose. Natalie raised her eyebrows, her heart beating faster. Skyline, that name had appeared in countless articles, the very projects she had dreamed of when staring at pictures of gleaming skyscrapers at sunset. If she could be part of this project, it would make a significant difference. Before she could respond, the doors of the large conference room swung open. Mr. Vance, head of the design department, emerged with a face that was both stern and exhilarated. "Everyone into the meeting now," he ordered curtly. The hall was packed. Tension filled the air, broken only by the rustle of papers and the scrape of chairs. On the big screen, Skyline's logo glowed brightly. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime," Mr. Vance began. "They want two different design proposals to consider, and our firm will provide both." The room held its breath. Natalie's palms were dampened with sweat. Two proposals, which meant two team leaders. Vance's eyes swept across the crowd before landing on two familiar faces, Winters, Matthews. "The two of you will lead." A murmur rippled through the room. Several employees exchanged glances, both nervous and intrigued. Everyone was aware of the never-ending rivalry between Natalie and Damien, and now they would be pitted against each other in a true battle, where the prize wasn't just money but reputation. Damien smirked, leaning slightly toward Natalie to whisper, "Once again, fate has set us against each other." Natalie drew in a deep breath, nodded to Vance, then shot back curtly, "I'm ready." Their eyes met, sparks flashing between them just like in the waiting room years ago. But this time the fire burned brighter, hotter, more dangerous. In the days that followed, the office split into two camps. Natalie's desk became a war zone, walls plastered with drawings, boards covered in scribbled notes, her team buzzing like a hive. She worked relentlessly, issuing rapid-fire instructions. "We need to recalculate the lighting system, integrate reflective glass, optimize natural light, and don't forget the energy efficiency component." Across the office, Damien's team was just as intense. He stood at the center, marker in hand, sketching bold curves across the whiteboard, his voice brimming with confidence. "Think bigger. We're not just building a structure, we're creating a symbol. This curve has to break convention, something that makes the entire city look up." The two teams became like rival kingdoms. Each morning, their eyes locked with open defiance. Even lunch breaks were divided, with one side at the cafe downstairs and the other ordering in. Employees from other departments whispered about the rivalry, half worried they might tear the office apart, half eager to see who would win. Of course, Dina never missed a chance to tease her friend. One late afternoon, she leaned over Natalie's desk and whispered, "Don't you see it? You and Damien have turned this place into two factions straight out of Game of Thrones." Natalie didn't look up, her eyes glued to her sketches. "It's different. There's no throne here." "Oh, but there is a prize," Dina said slyly. "And it's obvious you want to beat him more than anything." Natalie sighed, setting her pen down. "Dina, do you think I don't know that? I have to win. Not just for the project, but because—" She trailed off, unwilling to admit the deeper reason. She couldn't bear the thought of Damien once again standing on the podium, smiling smugly in victory. As the deadline approached, the pressure mounted. Natalie practically lived at the office, dark circles forming under her eyes. She checked every line, every number, refusing to allow even the smallest mistake. Damien, in contrast, always looked composed. He appeared each morning with a fresh cup of coffee, moving with calm confidence. But Natalie knew better. She could tell from the 3D models sprouting on his desk and the audacious sketches taped to his wall that he was working just as obsessively. And though it infuriated her, she couldn't deny it. His ideas had an undeniable allure. One late night, when the office was nearly empty, Natalie stood by the printer, waiting for her documents. Suddenly, Damien appeared behind her, coffee in hand. "Still here, Winters?" His voice was tinged with fatigue, though his eyes still sparkled with mischief. "I'll leave when the work is done," she answered flatly. Damien shrugged, setting the cup down on her desk. "Temporary truce. Drink this before you collapse." Natalie hesitated, then quietly accepted. For a fleeting moment, the tension dissolved, replaced by a hazy, unspoken something. But just as quickly, they turned back to their work, as though the moment had never happened. As the presentation day drew closer, the air grew heavier. Everyone knew the Skyline project could change both Natalie's and Damien's careers forever. And amid all the strain and rivalry, one thing was undeniable. It was their competition that pushed them both to the very peak of their abilities. At the final prep meeting, Mr. Vance stepped in, surveying the two exhausted yet bright-eyed teams. He chuckled, shaking his head. "You've made me both proud and exhausted. Just try not to kill each other before the presentation." Laughter rippled through the room, easing the tension for a moment. But in Natalie's and Damien's eyes, the sparks of rivalry only flared brighter than ever. The closer the presentation day came, the more Hamilton and Company's office resembled a hive in chaos. Blueprints, models, and reports piled up everywhere. The lights stayed on all night. The clatter of keyboards and the scratch of pencils became the familiar soundtrack. Natalie threw herself into work like a machine. Every detail of the project had to be perfect down to the last millimeter. On her desk, lighting diagrams, structural models, and energy statistics were stacked in neat piles, each sheet numbered and clipped. "Natalie, it's really late. Maybe you should get some rest," one team member ventured cautiously. "No, we need to recheck this system. If the water filtration doesn't meet standards, the entire sustainability concept collapses," she said firmly, her eyes burning with focus. Her teammates exchanged glances, then returned to their work. Natalie's relentless determination fueled them with a strange energy, despite the fact that exhaustion weighed on everyone. Meanwhile, on the other side of the office, Damien led his team with a completely different style. No thick binders of notes, no suffocating pressure. He gave his people freedom to unleash their creativity, sketching daring curves, designing structures that startled as much as they inspired. "Think of the building as a piece of music," Damien said, swiftly sketching sweeping lines on paper. "It needs rhythm. It has to make people look up and feel their hearts beat faster." His team was noisy, playful, and full of laughter. They were relaxed, but no one could deny that they were producing brilliant ideas. The contrast between them only heightened the clashes between Natalie and Damien. One morning, they bumped into each other at the cafe in the lobby. Natalie ordered an espresso, her dark circles under her eyes a reminder of another sleepless night. Damien strolled over, placing a latte beside her, lips curved in a half smile. "Winters, you look like a zombie. Don't worry, I'll beat you on merit, not by watching you self-destruct." Natalie looked up, her eyes cold. "Thanks, Matthews." I'd rather collapse than draw meaningless curves. Meaningless? Damien laughed, stirring his coffee. You'll see, risk is what makes a building live forever. The encounter lasted only minutes, but it was enough for bystanders to sneak glances and whisper. Everyone could sense it. The air between them crackled like blades striking sparks. The same scene played out in the company hallways. When Natalie hurried past, arms full of drawings, Damien never missed a chance to tease. Careful, Winters. That stack looks heavy enough to bury you. Natalie shot back instantly. At least they're real blueprints, not fantasy sketches that will never be built. Damien shrugged, smirking. But when she disappeared down the hall, a flicker passed through his eyes, a quiet admission he'd never voice. She was good, infuriatingly good. And that was exactly why he couldn't look away. One night, the clock had already passed 10. The office was silent, lit only by the pale neon glow that fell across the architectural models. Natalie sat stubbornly at her desk, eyes sore, fingers trembling from fatigue. The door opened softly. Damien walked in, his shirt collar undone, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I'm guessing you haven't had dinner," he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. Natalie looked up, about to refuse, but exhaustion stole her words. She quietly picked up the cup, warmth seeping into her chilled hands. "Why are you still here?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Damien dropped into the chair beside her, his gaze gentler. "Because I've got a project to finish too. But honestly," he paused, frowning slightly, "I wanted to make sure you didn't pass out at your desk." Natalie gave a startled little laugh, surprised by the hint of concern. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the steady hum of the air conditioner filling the space. Then Damien leaned over, glancing at her screen. "Your project? It's impressive. Not at all what I expected." Natalie squinted at him. "Matthews, did you just compliment me? Are you sick or something?" Damien chuckled, this time with a genuine, unguarded smile. "Let's call it a truce. Just for tonight." For that fleeting moment, the sharp edge of their rivalry dulled, giving way to a warmth neither of them dared to name. They finally left the office late. The parking lot was nearly empty, golden lights casting long shadows of their figures on the ground. Natalie slowed her pace, glancing sideways at Damien. He stopped, extended his hand. "Good luck, Winters." Natalie hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, holding longer than necessary. In that instant, their eyes met not with rivalry, but acknowledgement, and something more ambiguous. "May the best win," Natalie whispered, pulling her hand away and walking quickly toward her car. But her heart pounded, and Damien's smile burned in her mind. Damien stood still, watching her retreat. A strange smile curved his lips, not one of victory, but something softer, truer. That morning, Natalie woke to the blare of her alarm. Nearly an hour late, she bolted upright, staring in horror at the blinking digits on the clock. Her phone lay lifeless on the nightstand, its screen dark and mocking a dead battery. "Damn it," Natalie muttered, frantically pulling on a white blouse while stuffing folders into her bag. The scent of yesterday's stale coffee still lingered in the small apartment. She dashed past the kitchen, tried to pour herself a quick cup, but her trembling hands spilled it across the counter. No time. Snatching up her bag, she sprinted out the door, heart pounding. The Hamilton and Company building gleamed in the early sunlight. Natalie hurried into the elevator just as the clock neared 8:30. Today was the day Skyline's presentation was the culmination of 3 relentless months of preparation. But when she reached the conference room, her breath caught. Her laptop, the one with the entire presentation, wasn't in her bag. She had left it at home. Dizziness swept over her. She gripped the table, breathing hard, and then a familiar voice came from behind. "You're lucky." All the files were uploaded to the server. It was Dina, her best friend, holding out her own laptop with a reassuring smile. "Use mine. Everything you need is here." Natalie clutched her friend's hand, exhaling shakily. A lifesaver. The Skyline boardroom shone under bright lights, a glass-topped table stretching long, with rows of executives seated and facing each other with solemn faces. At the head sat Mr. Thompson, Skyline's leader, sharp eyes dissecting every detail. Damien presented first. He stepped up in his flawless navy suit, voice deep and steady, radiating confidence. His slides flowed seamlessly, his bold ideas earning approving nods. Watching from her seat, Natalie felt a twinge of respect and dread. He really was hard to beat. Then it was her turn. Natalie drew in a long breath, stepped to the front, and began. The opening slide appeared, her voice clear as she spoke of sustainability and rainwater harvesting. Everything started smoothly until she clicked the wrong folder on Dina's laptop. Suddenly, the screen filled with a photo of Dina in a bikini, grinning poolside. The room froze. Then muffled chuckles rippled through the silence. "I'm so sorry." Natalie fumbled to close the image, her face burning. That was the wrong file. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught Damien's smile, but it wasn't mocking. It was sympathetic. Natalie pushed on, forcing herself to remain composed. However, when the waiters brought in the wine, disaster struck again. Reaching for a document, her elbow knocked over a glass, sending crimson liquid spilling straight onto Mr. Thompson's pale trousers. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, grabbing napkins and bending to blot it up. Only then did she realize her hand was pressed against his leg. Mortified, she yanked it back, her face blazing. The air thickened. Mr. Vance shot her a disappointed look. "It's fine," Mr. Thompson said briskly, waving it off. "Just an accident." But Natalie could hear the whispers. Her throat closed, her eyes stung. She stammered, "Excuse me, I need to." And she fled. The restroom was silent but for the steady trickle of water. Natalie shut herself in a stall, leaning back against the wall as tears streamed down her face. All the effort, the sleepless nights, her team's hard work ruined in a single cursed day. "I've failed, completely." A knock sounded on the door. "Natalie." She froze. That voice is low, familiar. Damien. "Go away, Matthews." "I can't take being laughed at anymore." Silence, then his voice came, firm, steady. "Open the door." "I can't. I ruined everything." "You haven't ruined anything, Winters." For the first time, his voice carried no mockery, no edge. "You're stronger than this. Don't quit over one bad day." Natalie's tears stilled. She listened, stunned by the sincerity in his tone. "Your team worked too hard for you to give up now. Don't let one slip erase everything. They need you back. And he hesitated. "I want to see you stand up again." Her hand trembled as she slid back the lock. The door opened, and there he was. Damien, his eyes equal parts worry and resolve. "I must look awful," she whispered hoarsely. Damien gave a small smile. "You're beautiful." Even after crying. Realizing what he'd said, he cleared his throat quickly. "I mean, beautiful like a warrior. Now come on, they're waiting for you." Natalie let out a shaky laugh through her tears, the first smile she'd managed all day. Back at the table, she sat straighter, locking eyes with Mr. Thompson. Her voice rang out steady now, every word deliberate. "As I said, this sustainable system not only reduces operating costs, it makes a green statement for the entire city. Skyline won't just have a building, it will have a declaration." Mr. Thompson listened closely, nodding. The laughter was gone. The pity was gone. Only her sharp, unwavering conviction remained. When the meal ended, he rose, offering one of his rare smiles. "Both proposals are excellent. I'll need 10 days to consider. You'll hear from us then." Natalie exhaled, shoulders sagging with exhaustion, but inside her confidence reignited. As Damien passed, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. "I told you. You're stronger than that." She turned, catching his gaze. No arrogance this time, only a strange warmth. And in that moment, Natalie knew. This fateful day wasn't ending. It was only just beginning. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. After the chaotic lunch with Skyline, the atmosphere at Hamilton and Company was no longer the same. Natalie noticed something clearly. Damien Matthews had changed. No longer the man who lived to provoke her. No longer the smug grin whenever he shot down her ideas. He was still confident, still sharp, but there was something different now. a quiet kind of attentiveness Natalie had never seen before. The next day, when she returned to her desk after a meeting, a small silver-wrapped chocolate bar sat neatly on the surface. No note, no message, just an unexpected gift. Natalie frowned, scanning the office. Damien was at his corner desk, focused on his screen, but when she glanced his way, he caught her eye. He raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips, half confession, half challenge. Natalie quickly turned away, her ears burning. No way. Matthews did something this sweet? It wasn't just the chocolate. A few days later, Natalie was buried in drafting reports when she suddenly realized it was well past 1 in the afternoon. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. Then Damien's voice sounded behind her. Winters, are you planning to survive on coffee all day? She turned to find him setting a sandwich box on her desk. I don't, she began, flustered, but he cut her off. Don't argue. Eat it unless you want to faint over your blueprints. I'm not volunteering to replace you in the next presentation. With that, he walked away, leaving only the familiar trace of his cologne. Natalie stared at the sandwich, her heartbeat racing. This was Damien, the man who had driven her crazy countless times. Naturally, Dina didn't miss a beat. She propped her chin on her hand, eyes sparkling. Well, chocolate, sandwiches. Who would have guessed Damien Matthews could act like a romantic? Natalie scowled. You're imagining things. Imagining? Dina giggled. I was right here. I saw the way he set that sandwich down like it was priceless. Dina, Natalie shot back, her face heating. He was just being polite. Dina narrowed her eyes knowingly. Polite? You sure the two of you are only enemies? Natalie turned away, her pulse quickening. She hated to admit it, but Dina wasn't entirely wrong. In the days that followed, Natalie sensed something shifting quietly between them. When she entered a meeting room, Damien's gaze always found her first, and this time, it wasn't challenging. It lingered, steady, long enough to make her look away and fluster. During one debate about the ventilation system, Damien's smile wasn't mocking, but warm, almost encouraging. This idea of yours, it's not bad, he said softly. Natalie froze, heart hammering, unable to focus for the rest of the meeting. One evening, Natalie stayed late to refine the detailed drawings. The office lights cast pale shadows, her silhouette stretching across the wall. She heard footsteps behind her and didn't need to turn to know who it was. Winters? Damien's voice was lower, gentler than usual. Let me help. Before she could refuse, he picked up the stack of prints from her hands, organizing them with a casual ease, as if it were his responsibility. Natalie shifted uneasily, not sure what to say. All she could hear was the quickening rhythm of her own heartbeat. The space between them narrowed. When she finally looked up, his gaze locked onto hers. The reflection of the office lights in his eyes made her chest tighten. She quickly turned back to her screen, pretending to concentrate, but she could still feel the warmth of his steady, patient stare unraveling her thoughts. And she wasn't the only one who noticed. Their colleagues whispered, trading knowing glances whenever Damien set coffee on Natalie's desk or whenever Natalie awkwardly dodged his gaze. One afternoon, as Natalie left a meeting, Dina leaned in and murmured, if looks could kill, he would have finished you 1,000 times over, just by staring too long. Natalie laughed, but it came out uneasy. She couldn't deny it. Every time Damien came near, her heart betrayed her logic, pounding too fast, too hard. She kept telling herself it was just fatigue, the result of the project's stress. But deep inside, Natalie knew something had changed, quietly certainly, like an underground current slowly sweeping away every boundary of enemy they had once built. 10 days of waiting dragged on like a century. At Hamilton and Company, the tension was palpable. Every member of both Natalie's and Damien's teams sat on edge, torn between hope and dread. On the appointed day, the two teams gathered in the large conference room, sunlight streaming through the tall windows onto the long glass table where Mr. Thompson of Skyline sat composed and steady. He slowly set his glasses down and surveyed the room. I've reviewed both proposals carefully, his voice rang out evenly, and to be honest, I don't want to miss out on either one. Everyone held their breath. Natalie bit her lip. Damien folded his arms, but his eyes gleamed. Therefore, Mr. Thompson paused, then smiled. We want a combined project taking the boldness of Matthew's design and the sustainability of Winter's proposal. The room erupted in murmurs. Natalie froze, her heartbeat hammering. Damien tilted his head toward her, a slight curve at the corner of his mouth. Congratulations, Winters. Looks like we're on the same side again. Natalie swallowed hard. This battlefield would be anything but peaceful. The very next day, a dedicated office was arranged for the unified team. The walls were plastered with drawings from both proposals, stacked like trophies of war. The air inside was taut as a bowstring. My reflective glass plan is more efficient, both cost-saving and eco-friendly, Natalie insisted, tapping her design. But it's too safe, not impactful enough, Damien countered, sketching sweeping curves. People need a structure that makes their jaws drop. Drop from awe or from the roof collapsing over their heads, Natalie shot back. Such exchanges repeated again and again, each so intense that the rest of the team kept silent, too nervous to intervene. The first joint meeting ended in heavy silence. As the room emptied, Dina tugged Natalie aside, whispering, "You two arguing looks exactly like a married couple fighting over paint colors for the living room." "Dinah!" Natalie hissed, but her cheeks flamed all the same. In the following days, clashes became a routine occurrence. Natalie, ever the perfectionist, checked every figure, refusing to allow risks. Damien, bold as ever, tore through conventions to achieve a striking visual effect. "This drawing isn't realistic. The costs double," Natalie said firmly. "Then we cut elsewhere." "Don't strangle creativity with numbers," Winters shot back. At times, the tension grew so thick that one team member quietly turned on soft background music to ease the atmosphere. Strangely, though, the fiery debates began to reveal each other's strengths. One evening, Natalie held her ground on keeping the rainwater harvesting system, backing it with meticulous data. At first, Damien opposed her, but as he met her unwavering gaze, he slowly nodded. "Fine. Keep it. Smarter than I thought." Natalie blinked, startled. His first concession. And another time she surprised herself by agreeing when Damien showed how a curved dome could become the focal point of the entire structure. "Maybe," she admitted softly, "that idea isn't so bad." Damien smiled, and for once it wasn't a mocking grin, but a genuine one. Gradually, the meeting shifted. They still argued, but no longer only to defeat each other. Instead, they began listening, adjusting, and finding common ground. Two opposite temperaments, when pieced together, formed a startlingly complete picture. Natalie realized that while she labored over control and detail, Damien brought vision and boldness she sometimes lacked. And Damien, behind his arrogance, knew her perfectionism was what kept his dreams standing strong. One afternoon, as a meeting wrapped up, Natalie gathered her papers while Damien lingered by the unified drawings. "You know, Winters," his voice was quieter than usual, "I never thought I'd see the day my design needed someone else to complete it." Natalie paused, glancing up. "I never thought I'd have to work with you. But maybe this isn't so bad." Their eyes met, holding longer than normal. Damien's smile lost its edge, softened into something like understanding. Flustered, Natalie turned away, though her lips curved slightly despite herself. The skyline project slowly took shape, the merged designs becoming sharper, stronger. Around the office, whispers began. Maybe they're not just rivals anymore. Dina giggled each time Natalie flushed when Damien stood too close. At the end of a weekend meeting, Mr. Vance walked in, clapping his hands once. "Good work, everyone. Keep this up, and Skyline will be blown away." Then his gaze shifted knowingly between Natalie and Damien. "Just try not to kill each other before we finish." The room burst into laughter. Natalie and Damien exchanged a glance, both shaking their heads. But deep down, they both knew the danger wasn't killing each other. The real danger was the growing, yet strange, pull between them. In the days following Skyline's merged team decision, the office no longer felt like a battlefield. There were still heated debates, but somewhere between sharp rebuttals, the looks and smiles had begun to change. Damien started arriving earlier than usual, always with 2 cups of coffee in hand. One cup would appear on Natalie's desk. No note, no explanation. The first time, she eyed him suspiciously. "What's this?" "Coffee," he shrugged, lips curving in a half smile. Can't have you passing out in the middle of the morning meeting. Natalie took the cup, trying to hide the small, involuntary smile tugging at her lips. Matthews showing thoughtfulness? Other times she'd catch him hunched over his screen close to midnight, eyes bloodshot, tapping his pen against a stack of blueprints. She would step closer, pressing her hand lightly over the papers. "Stop," she said firmly. "You won't last the marathon if you keep burning yourself out." He looked up, startled by her resolve, then exhaled and set the pen down. A tired smile ghosted across his face. "Fair enough, Winters. Maybe I needed someone to remind me of that." One late night, the office was nearly empty. Beyond the glass windows, the city glowed golden under the streetlights. Natalie and Damien sat side by side amid a mountain of drawings, the scratch of pencils mixing with the steady hum of the air conditioner. "Winters," Damien broke the silence, his voice lower than usual. "Why do you push yourself this hard?" Natalie's hand stilled. The question seemed simple, yet it pierced something deep. "Because I don't want to repeat my parents' mistakes," she admitted, her gaze drifting to a framed photo on her desk. "They owned a little shop once. However, due to carelessness and a lack of perseverance, it all collapsed. They divorced soon after. I always thought if they'd been more patient, more meticulous, maybe our family wouldn't have fallen apart." Damien followed her gaze, picking up the frame gently. The photo showed a young Natalie, grinning on a beach between her parents. "How old were you when they divorced?" he asked softly. 12, she said, her voice catching. "That's when I decided nothing in my life would fall apart because of neglect." The room fell quiet. Damien set the photo down, his fingertips brushing the edge of the frame. Then he leaned back in his chair, eyes shadowed. "I know what that feels like," he murmured. "My father left when I was 14. My mom raised my sister and me alone. I hated the helplessness, watching her work herself to exhaustion while I couldn't do anything. I thought, if I succeeded, maybe no one would leave me again." Natalie turned toward him. For the first time, she saw Damien without his armor of confidence and arrogance. Beneath it was a boy who had once been abandoned, carrying scars that never fully healed. "Matthews," she whispered. He gave a faint, crooked smile, but there was no sharpness in it. "Guess I've said too much." "No," she shook her head gently, her expression softening. "I never realized we had that much in common." In that midnight hour, they sat quietly, but the space between them had never felt smaller. No longer rivals, just two fractured souls recognizing each other. After that night, everything shifted. The meeting still brimmed with arguments, but beneath the barbed words lay a growing respect. Damien listened to Natalie more often, while she began to see his daring ideas with less hostility. Dina was the first to notice. One afternoon, as Damien left a cup of coffee on Natalie's desk, Dina leaned in with a whisper. "Did you see how he put that down? Like it was made of glass." Natalie flushed and quickly set the cup aside. "You're imagining things." "Imagining?" Dina grinned. "Or is your heart beating too loud to hear the truth?" Natalie stumbled for words, avoiding Dina's gaze. Deep down, though, she knew Dina was right. Another evening, after the team had gone, Natalie and Damien lingered over a 3D model. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, leaving only the glow of the city outside. "Perfect timing," Damien chuckled. "Looks like the universe wants us to take a break." Natalie laughed, startled by his lightheartedness. For once, his tone wasn't sarcastic. In the soft street light filtering through the windows, his face looked gentler, more human. Her heart skipped. From the moment Damien touched the photo on Natalie's desk, something unspoken existed between them. Neither admitted it, but both felt it. A deep current of understanding, a bond stronger than rivalry. Natalie began to see that behind his arrogance lay a heart terrified of being left behind. And Damien realized that beneath her cold perfectionism was a woman who only wanted to avoid repeating her family's tragedy. In the little moments, morning coffee, a reminder to eat, a quiet glance across the table, a seed of something new had taken root. No one dared name it yet, but it was there, growing, undeniable. That night, Hamilton and Company's office was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. The harsh white glow of the fluorescent lights cast long, overlapping shadows across stacks of files and scattered 3D models. Natalie carefully closed her laptop, inhaling deeply. Her shoulders ached with exhaustion, but her spirit felt buoyant. The last meeting of the day had gone smoothly. Beside her, Damien switched off his desk lamp, gathering the sketches left on the wooden surface. He glanced sideways at her. "Let's go, Winters. We've practically lived here every night this week." Natalie nodded softly. They walked down the empty hallway together, the echo of their footsteps filling the silence. The elevator carried them to the dim underground garage, where only a few cars rested beneath the dull yellow lights. The cool night air from the vents mingled with faint exhaust, thickening the atmosphere. Natalie clutched her bag to her chest, slowing her steps. Damien walked beside her, hands in his pockets, his expression calm, but his eyes kept flicking toward her. They stopped in front of her car. No words, just the lingering hush after their footsteps faded. "Winters," Damien finally spoke, his voice lower than usual. "Have you realized it?" Natalie looked up, startled. "Realized what?" He gave a small, wry smile, no mockery this time, but something almost bittersweet. "That we've spent 3 years hating each other, but really that was just an excuse." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, but memories flooded in. His morning taunts, their fiery arguments, and those quiet moments when he left chocolate or coffee on her desk. "You're saying," Natalie swallowed, her voice unsteady, "we hated each other because we were too afraid to admit we were always watching each other?" Damien's eyes locked onto hers, so intent she could hardly breathe. "Exactly. Not a single day here has gone by without me noticing you." The words hung heavy in the air, yet they lifted something inside her at the same time. Her cheeks burned. Her heart pounded wildly. Silence stretched between them. The yellow garage lights carved soft shadows across Damien's face, painting him in shades of light and dark. Natalie stared back, and for the first time, she didn't see a rival or the man who had driven her mad for years. She saw someone achingly close, startlingly sincere. Damien took a step forward. Natalie instinctively stepped back, her spine brushing against the cold metal of her car door. The air between them grew so thick she could hear her own heartbeat. "Winters," his voice was husky, roughened by something deeper. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" Natalie shook her head slightly. "No, but maybe this was always inevitable." The words had barely left her lips when Damien closed the distance. The kiss came naturally, like an electric current racing down her spine. His lips were warm, hesitant, yet fervent. At first, Natalie froze. Then her hand found its way against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thundering just as fiercely as her own. Her eyes fluttered shut, letting years of sharp words and stinging retorts dissolve into something sweet, overwhelming, and undeniable. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Natalie's fingertips brushed her lips, her wide eyes full of shock. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I can't believe—" Damien let out a low laugh, pressing his forehead lightly against hers. "Believe it, Winters. I've been lying to myself for 3 years, and I think so have you." Her hands trembled, but joy surged through her chest, raw and bright. She had never seen Damien like this, not the arrogant man who always stood above, but someone vulnerable, daring to open his heart. "Maybe," she murmured. "We were wrong from the very beginning." His fingers tightened gently around hers, his eyes burning with intensity. "The best mistake of my life." Natalie laughed through the shimmer of unshed tears. They lingered under the pale garage lights, neither wanting to leave. Her whole body still quivered, but beneath it all was a warmth that spread like fire. She knew everything had changed. That kiss, simple yet consuming, had erased the word rivals and planted the seed of something new, something nameless but undeniable. Natalie finally slid into her car, her hands still trembling, her lips tinged with that strange, sweet taste. As the engine started, she glanced in the rearview mirror and caught sight of Damien, standing there, watching her with a gentle smile that seemed impossible for him. Her heart raced all over again, embarrassed, thrilled, happy. Ever since that kiss under the golden garage lights, Natalie could no longer look at Damien the same way. Every morning when she walked into the office, her heart gave a small jolt at the sight of him leaning over his drafting table, or at the sound of his familiar laugh echoing down the hallway. On the surface, nothing had changed. The Skyline project remained intense, with meetings still full of debates. But in every moment, an invisible thread seemed to draw them closer together. The arguments still occurred, but instead of being so sharp, they left their coworkers holding their breath. Now there were smiles between the rebuttals, and even the occasional accidental touch. Matthews, these numbers don't add up. Natalie slid the calculations toward him, brows furrowed. Then let's fix them, Winters. He shrugged, handing her the pen, his fingers brushing hers by accident. Natalie jerked back, startled, but their eyes met for a split second. Damien's smile was faint, unreadable, while she quickly ducked her head to hide the heat blooming in her cheeks. The entire office began to sense something unusual. Colleagues who were used to watching Natalie and Damien tear into each other now occasionally caught the two of them, smiling together. One day when Natalie nitpicked over a design detail, Damien simply tilted his head and lowered his voice. You're right. This time I'm wrong. The room froze, not a sound. People glanced at each other as if they'd just witnessed an eclipse. Did Matthews just admit he was wrong? Someone whispered. Damien only smiled. Natalie flushed red and buried herself in her papers. Dina, of course, was the first to notice and the one who enjoyed it the most. She teased Natalie relentlessly at every chance. One afternoon, Natalie returned to her desk to find a folded slip of paper waiting for her. She opened it. Drink some water, Winters. Don't turn into a wilted plant in the office. Natalie laughed under her breath, but quickly tucked it away in her drawer, her heart racing. Dina appeared instantly, like a detective on the scent, chin propped on her hand as she observed. What's that? A love note? No, just a reminder, Natalie stammered. A very caring reminder. Dina's voice dripped with mischief. Natalie tried to glare at her, but couldn't hide the small smile tugging at her lips. Soon the notes became a habit. Don't forget lunch. Great job at the presentation this morning. Or sometimes just a doodle of a coffee cup with an arrow pointing toward his desk. Natalie kept every single one in her drawer, and each time she opened it, she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. Once she left a note on her desk by accident. By the time she returned, Dina had already read it and was holding it high in triumph. Oh my God, Natalie! You did better than I expected. From Matthews? I thought he only knew how to insult people. Dina! Natalie lunged to snatch it back, her face blazing red. Don't say that out loud. The whole office burst into laughter. Across the room, Damien looked up, caught her eye and raised an eyebrow. His mouth curled into a smile that was half challenge, half tenderness. Meanwhile, the Skyline project pushed forward. Their joint design grew sharper by the day. Damien's bold, eye-catching strokes paired seamlessly with Natalie's meticulous sustainability systems. What once seemed like irreconcilable styles now fit together in a strange, almost perfect balance. In one board meeting, Natalie presented on the rainwater collection system. Damien stood beside her, adding vivid visuals to her points. There were no harsh interjections, no icy stares, only teamwork that flowed as if they'd been partners for years. I have to say, one executive remarked, I've never seen the two of you work together this well. Natalie flushed. Damien only shrugged, glancing at her with a look that said far more than words. Of course, not everything came easily. Some arguments still flared, especially over costs. Your dome design alone will blow the budget by 15%, Natalie snapped, but it'll be the symbol of the entire project. Sometimes to create an icon, you have to pay the price. Damien shot back, his eyes blazing. The fight dragged on for nearly an hour before they compromised. The dome would stay, but other features would be trimmed. When Natalie finally signed off, she exhaled sharply. You're impossible. I know, Damien smirked, lowering his voice, but you like me that way. Natalie froze, speechless, before whipping her head away, her heart hammering uncontrollably. Their growing closeness became the office's worst-kept secret. The looks, the smiles, the scribbled notes, everyone saw it. though Natalie and Damien both pretended otherwise. One evening, as Natalie packed up, she glanced at the drawer stuffed with his little notes. She brushed her fingers over them, smiling to herself. How did I ever think I hated him? Across the room, Damien was still bent over a 3D model. When he noticed her staring, he frowned in mock suspicion. "What are you looking at, Winters?" Natalie's face flamed as she ducked her head. But as she turned away, the smile on her lips was impossible to hide. 6 months had passed since Skyline announced the decision to merge the two designs. 6 months of relentless work, debates, creativity, and countless sweet moments woven in between the grind. Now the Skyline project was nearly complete. Blueprints had become sharp 3D models, and dry numbers had transformed into feasible plans. The future Skyline Tower promised to be more than just a building. It was poised to become a new symbol of the city. On the day of the final rehearsal presentation, the spacious hall was filled to capacity. Executives, Skyline representatives, and senior Hamilton and Company employees all filled the seats. Natalie stood beside Damien, drawing a deep breath. Next to her, Damien adjusted his tie and shot her a quick wink. The presentation flowed more smoothly than anyone expected. Natalie spoke with firm conviction about the sustainability systems, while Damien carried the vision with bold architectural storytelling. Their rhythm was so seamless that people whispered, these two were born to work together. When the presentation ended, applause thundered across the room. Mr. Thompson stood, his voice brimming with excitement. "I've never seen such a harmonious collaboration. Hamilton and Company has exceeded all our expectations." Natalie exhaled in relief. Damien dipped his head slightly, a smile tugging at his lips. In that moment, they caught each other's gaze, their eyes reflecting a pride that belonged to them both, a joy that couldn't be divided. In the final months of the project, Natalie and Damien's relationship had shifted in ways that were impossible to ignore. They never made any public announcement, but everyone in the office could see it. The fierce arguments that once made the whole department tense were now replaced with playful back and forth. Natalie no longer blushed from anger, but from the occasional comment Damien made that sent her heartbeat into chaos. One morning, she walked into the office with dark circles under her eyes after a sleepless night. On her desk lay a small chocolate bar and a scribbled note, "To sweeten up your bitter day." Natalie laughed softly, slipping the chocolate into her drawer, but her smile lingered for the rest of the day. Another time, Damien sat frozen for hours in front of a model, his shoulders tense with fatigue. Passing by, Natalie paused, resting a hand gently on his shoulder. "Take a break, Matthews. If your back snaps, who's going to convince Skyline then?" Damien looked up, meeting her worried gaze before giving a tired smile. "Thanks, I forgot I'm not a superhero." Colleagues nearby exchanged knowing glances, their suspicions confirmed without a word. Dina, as always, was the loudest voice. During lunch, she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "I told you so. The sworn enemies finally turned into the inseparables." Natalie protested immediately. "Dina, we're just good teammates." At that moment, Damien walked by, pausing just long enough to shoot Natalie a mischievous glance. "Good teammates, huh? Yeah, that's what I'd call it." His emphasis on the last word sent Natalie's face flaming red. The whole office erupted in laughter. And so, the secret between Natalie and Damien became the most open secret at Hamilton and Company. No announcements, no declarations were necessary. Every look, every smile, every tiny gesture spoke louder than words. One weekend meeting, after the team wrapped up their progress report, Mr. Vance crossed his arms and squinted at the two of them. "Guess I won the office pool," he chuckled. "Knew you two would end up like this sooner or later." The room exploded with laughter. Natalie hid her face in her hands, mortified. Damien, however, casually took her hand right there at the conference table, a silent confirmation that needed no words. When Skyline's design was officially approved, Hamilton and Company hosted a grand celebration in the main lobby. Music filled the air, glasses clinked, and laughter rose as people danced. Natalie stood beside Damien, watching as their colleagues cheered and reveled in the moment. "Do you think everything we went through was worth it?" she asked softly. Damien turned, his eyes glinting under the lights. "Worth it? Not just for Skyline, but because of, he paused, squeezing her hand gently, because of you. Natalie's heart trembled, but this time she didn't look away. She smiled, leaning her head lightly against his shoulder. In that moment, with music swelling and lights blazing, Natalie knew. They had gone from rivals to teammates and now to something far deeper. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. The Skyline Tower was inaugurated amid applause and flashing cameras. Standing on stage, Natalie and Damien were introduced as the two lead architects of the project. The hall erupted when Mr. Thompson, Skyline's representative, declared, "This is not just a building, it is a testament to the power of collaboration, vision, and perseverance. And I must say, Natalie Winters and Damien Matthews are truly the golden couple of this project." Laughter rippled through the audience. Natalie flushed, but Damien leaned in to whisper, "Did you hear that? The golden couple. I like the sound of it." Natalie shot him a glare, but the corner of her lips betrayed a smile. The success of Skyline elevated them both to new heights in their careers. Hamilton and Company's board announced promotions. Natalie was named head of sustainability, while Damien became creative director. When their names echoed through the hall, their colleagues rose to their feet, clapping thunderously. Dina cheered the loudest. "Knew it! Nobody deserves it more than the two of you." Natalie looked around at the familiar faces, pride swelling in her chest. 3 years of battles, tears, and countless sleepless nights, everything had led to this moment. Beside her, Damien squeezed her hand gently, as if to say, "We did it." But the most precious reward wasn't the titles nor the admiration. It was how their relationship now flowed naturally, with no need for hiding. In the office, Natalie leaned over his desk without hesitation to look at a sketch. Damien casually left little chocolates on her desk whenever she had a rough day. No one whispered behind their backs anymore. Instead, people accepted them as part of the office's fabric. A talented pair, inseparable. One morning, as Damien furrowed over a cost report, tension etched across his shoulders, Natalie placed a hand on him. "Relax, Matthews. Nobody's perfect. Not even you." He looked up, her gentle smile disarming him, and chuckled. "You always know how to pull me back from the edge." Natalie replied softly, "Just like you did that day, when you knocked on the bathroom door." Silence lingered. Both recalled the memory. What once felt like disaster had, in truth, opened the door to something unexpected. One late afternoon, the office had mostly emptied. Natalie packed her desk, reaching into the drawer for a pen. She froze when she spotted a neatly folded note inside. Her heart skipped as she unfolded it. The familiar handwriting read, "Some tears are worth shedding if someone patient enough is there to knock and wipe them away." Natalie's vision blurred. She remembered it vividly, sitting on the cold floor of the restroom, convinced the world was crumbling, until a quiet knock and a steady voice reached her. If Damien hadn't come that day, would she have found the strength to keep going? She turned. Damien was standing at the doorway, hands in his pockets, smiling as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Natalie walked quickly to him, saying nothing, only wrapping her arms around him. Damien pulled her close, holding her in his warmth. They stayed like that for a long time, while outside the city lights flickered on, one by one. Then he tilted down, brushing a sweet kiss against her lips. It wasn't trembling or hesitant like the first one in the parking garage. This kiss was mature, tender, yet burning with an unspoken vow. "I'll always be here, knocking when you need me." That evening, Natalie left the office with her heart light and steady. Beside her, Damien's hand clasped hers firmly. The Skyline chapter had closed in triumph, but another door had opened to love, to trust, and to a future they would build together. Love doesn't always start with harmony. Sometimes it begins with collisions, endless arguments, and sharp edges. However, through conflict, people learn to listen, understand, and walk side by side. And sometimes all it takes is someone patient enough to knock when you're at your breaking point. That autumn, the city glowed with golden leaves and streets strung with lights. After months of walking side by side with Skyline, Natalie and Damien chose to hold their wedding in the grand hall of the tower itself, a symbol of both their careers and their love. On that day, the afternoon sun streamed through soaring glass panels, casting a warm glow across the white carpet unfurled down the aisle. Rows of seats were filled with colleagues, friends, and family. Dina bustled back and forth, playing bridesmaid and barely holding back tears. Natalie appeared in a pure white gown, clutching a bouquet of orchids. Each step echoed softly to the gentle notes of the piano. At the end of the aisle, Damien stood waiting in a deep blue suit, his eyes alight not with arrogance, but with the devotion of a man waiting for his forever. When Natalie placed her hand into Damien's, the hall erupted in applause. The officiant smiled, his voice steady and warm. Love is not only harmony, it is the journey of learning to endure, to understand, and to lift each other up. Today, we witness two souls who went from rivals to confidants, from arguments to unity. Natalie and Damien's eyes shimmered as the officiant asked, "Do you vow to love, cherish, and honor one another, in bright days and in dark?" In unison, their voices rang out, "I do," firm, certain, without hesitation. Applause thundered through the hall as Damien leaned down, sealing the promise with a long, sweet kiss. A kiss that carried every battle, every tear, and every joy woven into a single moment of triumph. The reception afterward overflowed with laughter. Dina raised her glass of wine, grinning through happy tears. "I told you so! Who still dares call these two eternal enemies?" Laughter roared. Natalie blushed while Damien only pulled her closer, whispering against her ear, "Let them laugh. Today you are my greatest victory." Natalie smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Yes, she thought. Not skyline, not titles. This moment. As night fell, Skyline's radiant lights illuminated the city. Hand in hand, Natalie and Damien stepped onto the rooftop balcony. The autumn breeze brushed past, carrying echoes of music and laughter from the hall below. Damien wrapped his arms around her, his whisper soft against the night. "A new door has opened, Winters. From now on, we'll walk through everything together." Natalie nodded, lifting her lips to his once more. Beneath the glow of Skyline, they were no longer just successful architects, but two hearts that had finally found their forever.